Didn't know?
Japan.
Yeah, yeah.
That's right. Now I remember.
He came to Japan for vacation, and
Yeah.
I met him. I offered him to take him to dinner in Tokyo, and it was a pretty good time.
Tokyo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
Sounds
it
fun.
was really surreal for me to like meet and talk to somebody in the real world who
I
was
met
like
Bombshit
who
before.
fucking knew what was going on like with that shit. So hang on a minute, I got it set up. All right, we are now streaming to my YouTube. So I'm going to link that to you guys so that you guys can see and check. I mean, you guys can talk if you want.
Um,
I mean, just like say like I mean, I understand that we're trying to do a thing here, but we're also just hanging out. So that's the tone here.
We're
true,
just
true.
hanging out.
And
Um,
I'm linking it now in Discord. So FC, if you would be a doll and go in and tell me if you can hear how the voice quality is.
Uh, yeah, it's okay.
sounds good to me.
All right. Everybody else, can you guys talk a bit so that we can get some calibration in?
All right, I'm back.
Oh
Um,
shit. You weren't here the entire time? Damn it, you
Oh
made me
no.
look like an idiot.
What's up?
All right, well, I hit the fucking start streaming button and I was like, okay, you guys can talk, and poor Tayo was like, what, me? This isn't my thing.
Okay. Well, welcome. This is the first of out of how many we don't know yet. Podcasts for Blackened Skies. I am
First
Nuka.
of one, hopefully. But
First
if
of
you
one.
guys want more, then I guess I have no choice.
I'm Nuka. What you just heard, Krezith or
Yeah.
Krezith.
No. It's this just call me Xerth. Chirth actually is
There we
even
go.
better.
gotcha. I'm Tayo.
Hi Tayo. Tayo
You
is
know, I
playing the
actually, I
I was
actually read you as Tio.
Yeah, everyone has their own way of saying it.
I like Tayo and I see it as Tayo. Our buddy Tayo is not a moderator of any sort uh, in this game, but he is no moderation at all. No, but he is playing the Democratic Republic of Brazil, a communist South American country, one of the poorer countries in the game, and they're going through a mild economic recession, and they are going to be our connection to you, the players, tonight. Because
How
Uh,
fun.
yeah, so we're going to get to
Yeah.
see how the world looks from the point of view of some of the inhabitants who are not having it so great, because they just got out of a pretty bloody civil war.
Yeah.
Speaking
life
of
sucks, man.
Speaking of bloody war, Nuke, do you want to talk about why you wanted to do Blackened Skies?
Yeah. So, as some of you may know, I migrated from the Nest forum over to IoT, and I started making a couple of different games to get my feet wet. But one of the things I really wanted to do was to make a big world-spanning style game set in the 20th century. EQ and Symphonetic had quite a few of those that were run really well over in the Nest forum. Well, run it very well in the sense that they attracted a lot of players and attracted a lot of activity. Um, and I wanted to do something similar for the IoT forum. Get a lot of activity, get a lot of players interacting in an atmosphere that a lot of people really know. So the World War II era was definitely an easy choice for me. It's a very well studied era. You have games like Hearts of Iron, Call of Duty that have exposed us to that era. So that made it like a pretty good fit. Um, in terms of how I was developing the world, though, it actually was kind of random, to be honest. I
That's an understatement, guys. Like,
Yeah.
that's why that's funny.
I literally I was literally messaging Krezith as I was dicking around with a Victoria 2 paintable map. Hey, do you think the United States could conquer Japan? And what would it look like after? And he's like, probably not.
Yeah.
Probably couldn't conquer it. And I was like, well, what if they did? So that is how Blackened Skies really started. Um, it definitely was.
Yeah, that was kind of the
Inst-
flashpoint moment, I think.
yeah.
Because
So
then
how
we
we decide?
started, because what happened after that was we started talking about like what would have to exist for this world where America owns Japan to make sense. And
Right.
honestly, we kind of, I mean, we didn't really bullseye it, but we didn't really bullseye it, but we got, I think, some sort of logic in there, in terms of just trying to like think it backwards from this kind of absurd premise. And that was a pretty
And
fun
then
thing
think
to
it
do,
forward.
honestly, because we
Yeah.
we got to say stuff like, well, it doesn't look like this political situation means that Europe would have had like a single great war, but rather several smaller wars. And then we were like, oh, well, that's an interesting problem. So it's just like a lot of the settings sort of came from a pretty absurd premise, but then as we got more and more serious about it, some of that absurdity was sort of sidelined in the name of saying like, okay, let's try to like lend a little bit of weight to this. And so, that's kind of where we are
Definitely.
now.
Yeah, so when I was first looking at how to design the scenario, aside from the United States occupying Japan, one of the things I really wanted to do was to make the world relatively equal in power. If you look at the original timeline of World War II, our timeline, the United States was definitely overpowered in comparison to its enemies of Germany and Japan, and especially when you added the Soviet Union and the United Kingdom to the Allies, you definitely had a situation where it was realistically impossible for the Axis powers to win a victory, even though they did look pretty unstoppable in early 1941 and 1942. So, one of the big ideas that I wanted to create in this timeline was an equal power structure. And it's interesting because when you see the United States in that first map, you see the United States controlling Canada, you see it controlling Japan and the Philippines and Iceland and Greenland. And you start thinking, oh my God, this is just like a USA wing. It's so powerful. It's even stronger than it is in our timeline. But then when you start delving into it, it's got a lot of internal issues, and its industrialization was not as effective as it was in our timeline. And then you start looking at some of the other powers where Russia is doing a bit better than it was in our timeline, and Germany and France and the United Kingdom all having, and Italy too, all having better success than they were economically at the very least in our timeline. And all of a sudden now you have people who could really challenge the United States. The United States can't just dominate like it would in our timeline. So that was actually a really nice thing to set up for me.
hmm Right. I think that one of the like main concepts that sort of underwrote this game was the concept of the rivalry between the United States and the United Kingdom, which is why in the backstory there were so many wars between them. But we wanted this rivalry to have a some long-lasting enmity behind it, because that would allow us to explain why these frankly unrealistic, imperial policies and colonies could be maintained, because they're caught up in this like jingoistic back and forth of like, well, I need this colony, well, I need this colony, and then the two of them keep butting heads in a situation where the rest of Europe frankly doesn't have to really get involved, because um, very little of at least in our conception, they weren't dependent on that conflict a lot. And to the extent that they needed to cooperate with either of them, um, cooperating with only one of them, Britain, would have been enough. So the rest of them were sort of free to pursue their own economic policies. And to a large extent, I felt that that amounted to the industrialization they pursued in real life. And but along the terms of like, okay, so we have France, we have Germany, we have Russia. they sort of formed this like continental détente in the time where the U.S. and U.K. were still going at it, and they were like, yeah, all right, look, we don't have to fight each other. We're all, sort of just trying to make money. And eventually, the social awareness in France hit a point where the French people were like, hey, can you stop making us work for less money than is required to live? And the French government was like, all right. And they stepped down, allowed the syndicate to form, and that's what sent ripples through the rest of the European alliance, because Germany was like, oh shit, our entire concept of the European security has been thrown into chaos by this like peaceful revolution that occurred in France. And yeah, I mean the rest is sort of the history of the game. But that created the third element when taking the history forward. If you have the United States, you have the United Kingdom, but you also have the interactions of the less global economies who can still bring quite a lot of strength to bear just because of their advanced technology and industrial capacity. So it creates a dichotomy between your global powers who have only a few reasons to cooperate and a lot more reasons to be antagonistic, and the regional powers who are sort of struggling to get above each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the other areas were admittedly not as, I don't want to say well thought out, but we didn't really take a really in-depth idea of, hey, how should this necessarily work? Bolivia is definitely the biggest offender of that.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I just thought it was like, hey, how can we make South America a bit more interesting than the dominance just between Brazil and Argentina, which ironically it ended up
it turned out being that
happening,
anyway.
which
Yeah,
I thought
honestly,
that was pretty funny.
yeah, honestly, it's funny because when we were doing the South American storyline, frankly, we had no idea about South America. Like, in retrospect, a lot of it probably needed more explaining. But the chips have fallen in a way that doesn't make the least amount of sense, and the players are getting into some pretty interesting politics. Like we made Bolivia the big bad guy just because we wanted to create some extra tension. We wanted to create a dimension of actual ideological conflict in South America, rather than the situation where you have all these like semi-cartels, these like corrupt democracies and variably military dictatorships fighting for control over like scarce human resources. So by creating the big bad Bolivia, that allowed an ideological conflict to emerge from that political situation. And I wouldn't say it energized it, because that would imply that there was no energy in South America historically, which is not true. But it did give it its own flavor, which I think is pretty interesting, because now you have this democratic federation of several states, and
Yeah.
they're trying to hold together, in lieu of this like autocratic empire that they've replaced. And then you have the revolutionary Brazilians, who Tayo can probably provide us some insight on how they work. I know you mentioned, Tayo, how you view Brazil in the context of like your gameplay and your decision making, but if you would like to discuss that here, that would be very welcome.
All right, sure. Yeah, like my whole like philosophy on playing Brazil is kind of I'll kind of restate what I said last time when we talked about
Yeah,
Blackened
that's fine.
Skies.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I am kind of playing it a bit differently than how I usually play games. Like oftentimes I'm actually in a similar position where I am a quote unquote democratic country who is actually pretty much a communist dictatorship, like full on Stalinist policies and jingoistic.
Uh-huh.
And I'm kind of just out to declare war and see how far I get. But in this game, I'm putting it more in the context of like, how do I make this country work? Because in the beginning, it was pretty much just me versus the monarchist Brazil. Rest in peace. It was pretty much just me versus monarchist Brazil, and then like things kept being stacked against me with America intervening. The limited help I got from the Europeans, like it was appreciated, but it wasn't much. So I would say it's pretty accurate to say that like it was pretty much I was pretty isolated in this incident, where I mean, thankfully Bolivia had its hands tied with Argentina, but like it was still like I wasn't really like war allies with Argentina. We're just kind of just
happened to be fighting the same enemy.
Yeah, it was pretty much just all circumstantial. So I didn't have to fight Bolivia head on. But essentially, like I was pretty much on my own. So I probably at first I would say that I was playing it more like how I play other games. But then as when I won the Civil War and like I had to try to like mediate this like costly peace, and try to balance between the economy and like where to, like for example an issue that came up was where should Brazil go, an agricultural like communist power where like it's revolved around farming, or an industrialized one. And I wanted to do the industrialized one because my kind of vision was to make Brazil like a strong industrial power with that, like in kind of a way that like doesn't result in like huge deforestations. That's kind of like an OOC goal.
Oh,
like,
I hate to break
really
it to you, but you're gonna have to deforest stuff.
Kind of, yeah.
I mean, that's just a fact, but I understand
Yeah.
what you're getting at.
Yeah, so basically what I'm trying to say with all of this is that I'm trying to not just kind of succeed for my own success, but I'm trying to see like how can I make Brazil an okay country to live in, I guess.
Yeah.
As
So,
it stands, oh, go ahead.
no, I was just I was gonna say that so good luck with that after having well, how many casualties was there in the war? I think like 2 million or something like that.
Like 2 million is a low estimate. 3 million is probably
Yeah.
closer to true.
So that'll be interesting to see how you do that.
Well, Brazil's population right now is about 31 million in the game, and before the war though they were like 35 million. So
yeah,
they're at 32 million about. Like some of those population have been displaced. They didn't actually die, but the point is that Brazil saw a contraction in its population that was pretty unfortunate. But
like 1/7 of my population just vanished.
Yeah. But on the other hand, it has placed the ruling elite of the Democratic Republic of Brazil in more or less complete control of the country.
Yeah. So
Silver
you got
linings.
that going for you.
Yeah, silver linings.
Autocratic.
I have a paper for you to read. It's titled "Juche: Theory and Practice in North Korea." You might find it helpful.
Good.
But real fast before I relinquish my control, I had a question about America actually.
Oh yeah.
Pretty much pure curiosity. Like, was the Civil War a long time coming? Like, was it pretty much just a matter of time before like things started like getting out of control for the Fed, or?
Yeah.
Like,
so the Fed definitely had some issue. So they actually had a socialist revolt in around 1918, early 1920s, that the Fed was able to crush. And they've been kind of just managing from one crisis to the next, because a lot of the issues of one party rule for the past 100 something years has been difficult for them to keep under control. You've had a lot of issues with racial tensions. You have a lot of issues with the urban-rural tensions, left-right tensions. So there's definitely always been something that was bubbling underneath for the United States. And to his credit, Masada actually did very well uh, in maintaining it for a while of keeping the U.S. out of civil war. I actually personally thought that they were going to collapse uh, at around 1932.
Yeah,
Was my
that was my
guess.
expectation also.
But
That would have been so
it's
great.
That would have been really helpful for you, yeah. Well, so Nuke, I mean, if you are finished, I could like insert something here. Like,
oh yeah, go for it.
yeah. So like, I really thought the United States was not a sustainable government, and like obviously we contrived the scenario so that it was that way, right? Like it's sort of like we created a scenario, we created them sick, and now we're commanding them, the players, to be well. Like, hey, what? Hey, how come you're so regressive? Hey, how come your people are so angry at your policies? You get it together, man. But Masada, like, he like friggin' owned up to it. He got those bootstraps out, I guess, and he was like, okay, well. And since he's Australian, it probably sounded like this. All right, well, if my people are going to be a bunch of fucking cunts, I'm just going to have to take control of the entire economy then. And that's why he nationalized the steel industry last turn. And he's just like he's not afraid to make very decisive like moves to like take control of an unstable situation. And that manifests in his foreign policy as really like aggressive, politicking, because and I think it's part of that is because Masada has a very robust understanding of how the world works in general, and that's like a personal trait he has. And this allows him to understand why stuff like the United States and countries which it is like formerly like trading partners or allied with, not having those partners anymore, he understands that that's going to be really bad for the United States, so he takes all the steps necessary to prevent that. He inhabits the character very, very well. And yeah, so like a lot of people complain about his diplomacy, and I'm just like, yeah, that's part of the course for Masada. He's just a very aggressive diplomat. And
Yeah.
I'm sure Tayo has more experience with this than I do.
I definitely do.
So yeah, it's been pretty interesting. So to answer your question,
But
no,
I want to
we
say
weren't gonna
that I want to say that wait. I just want to say that real quick. Even though it sounds like I'm complimenting Masada way too much, the situation he's in is still pretty, it's a pretty sensitive situation. I just think that he's been handling it pretty well, and I chalk that up to him having good insight for this sort of thing. I mean, he's been playing these games for many, 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 many years, so.
Yeah. He's definitely got an interesting worldview for it too. So, but yeah, to answer the original question, no, it wasn't going to be a guaranteed like there will be a civil war. But in a lot of ways, I think that the United States can emerge much stronger from a civil war than it would have without it.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
I have some things to say about that.
the U.S. has been very stagnant for a
Yeah.
while. So,
Right.
but we should
so,
move on to the other
Yeah, I could talk about
sort
the
of
United
topics.
States in this game all day. So.
So let's go to how we divvied up the responsibilities to launch it.
Yeah.
And this is kind of going into our co-modding aspect. Once Krezith and I agreed to do this modding project together, there was a lot that was going to go into it. I am not a big fan of stats. Anyone who played my last Superpowers NES would have noticed that every turn
Yeah.
without fail, I failed with South Africa's stats.
Yeah,
I
not
don't
only
know
that,
why.
he kept asking for people to volunteer to do the stats for him. And nobody was stepping up to the plate, but yeah, not a stats guy, this man over
Yeah,
here.
it's the little tiny numbers and adding and subtracting and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I totally pawned off all of my stats and therefore rule set duties because you can't really make a rule set if you're not making the stats.
Right, exactly.
So that was all on Krezeth, and I started working on the backgrounds actually, and I had a lot of crap happen in my personal life actually. My girlfriend had gotten hit by a car.
Oh shit.
Yeah, so
Oh
that was
shit,
pretty,
man.
Yeah.
that was pretty crazy.
Baby,
and
can
I
you
was
like not get hit by cars? I'm trying to make a game over here.
So,
Jesus Christ.
so
It
that's
says
why
it's a never-ending story. You can't let it end. Come on. It's
So,
just a broken pelvis.
looking at the date, I started the thread the day after our anniversary, and then I think like 2 weeks later or 1 week later, she got hit by the car, and then it was Christmas, and my hope to end the pre-thread by New Year's did not happen. I
Yeah.
think we ended up waiting until like halfway through February, I believe, something like that. In any case, yeah. So I was the one who was responsible more for the national backgrounds and the alternate history. Uh, we may have some critics on how realistic it seems, but
Yeah.
really, what we're trying to figure out is how can we have our objectives. How do we make our alternate history work to achieve those objectives?
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't feel that's the most realistic way to create an alternate history. You're supposed to start with the events and find out what the outcome would be from there. But
Yeah, but like so it's like yeah, that's so silly though because, you know, when you think about it, every like pivot in history will rely on somebody making a decision. And that's already like, you know, there's no formulaic way to do that. Right?
yeah,
So when you do an alternate history, you have to be thinking about the decisions. Actually, you know, even when you're like updating a game and going along with it, you have to be thinking about the decisions that individuals would be making. Like, what would a like, you know, what does the United States government think about this policy? Well, what would an individual from the aristocratic class in charge of the United States think? Like somebody who was raised in that society with all of those notions and predilections. What would they think in that situation? And specifically, you want to think about the like individual personalities of like major policymakers, especially in situations where a lot of what they're going to be doing is pretty much based on their personal will, right?
and that's why you saw a lot of interesting personalities, especially at the beginning of the game. And I would like to continue that on
Yeah.
as the decades go by. You had like Augustus Lippler, for example, the hard-assed dictator of Austria, Bohemia,
Uh-huh.
and you have guys like Tom Black in the United States. You have Thomas Wayne in the United States, who's a pretty interesting character. You got Hamill and
Yeah.
lots of different
He's a
people
pretty
that
interesting character. He
you,
probably dresses up like a bat and runs around at night.
yeah. This
The Elric brothers seem rather interesting.
yeah, the Elric
Oh, yeah.
brothers. We haven't heard the last of them, I don't think.
No, definitely not.
So I
No,
really enjoyed that
I started the
mapping
Elric
into,
brothers a while ago because like while I was thinking about like yeah, all right, you know, I guess I should start thinking about, you know, atomic stuff. I should start thinking about the nuclear side of things because that seems like it's going to be coming up, right? This is around 1934 when I was first thinking about it. And I was just like, so what's the big thing? Well, they're waiting on this theory of quantum mechanics, and that is going to shed a whole lot of light on how this shit works. And that's going to, you know, help put fuel on the fire for anybody's like nuclear programs. And when I decided, and actually Nuke and I both decided this, but when we decided that we did want nukes to be in the game, and they will be in the game, it was sort of like, I mean, yeah, right. Like everybody knows that like nukes are going to be in the game because atomic expertise is there. But when I decided that I wanted that, I was like, okay, I need to start thinking about where these people who have this very coveted knowledge in this timeline, like in this time in general, where are they at, and you know what are they doing? And we decided that Italy was probably where most of that shit was happening because Italy was a place that wasn't arresting their university professors en masse for expressing politically incorrect opinions. Other people were
Wow.
doing that a lot, and it sort of created a bad
Backfired.
taste in the mouths of academicians. But yeah. So like we were just like, all right, so it's going to be in Italy, and then we said, okay, this is going to be a cool like covert ops thing, and help set the mood for some more covert ops stuff that we hope to do. I mean,
Yeah.
espionage is definitely something that we think is really important, and but the nature of espionage means that you can't put it every detail that players need to have in public stats. So, a lot of espionage has to be played by ear.
Yeah, so that'll definitely increase as time goes on, and
Hmm.
some players have invested quite a bit into their espionage. I won't say
Yes,
who,
yes.
and other players have completely ignored it. I also won't say who, and
Yeah, yeah.
espionage is definitely going to be a really big factor in the times to come, and
Right.
if you're someone who hasn't really been investing in espionage that much, that can definitely open you up to some nasty little things happening to you.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
It's
um,
definitely recommended to keep an eye on your enemies and a closer eye on your friends.
exactly. So as we started doing the stats versus writing initially. Krezeth also does the war simulations. This was actually another thing that I really liked about bringing Krezeth on board with this
Nice.
project, was that I felt a lot of times that combat is really deterministic, where you let your own personal biases sometimes get in the way, not against
Hmm.
players necessarily, but you think about, um, hey, I think this could happen, or I think this could happen. Um, and a
Right.
model just kind of removes a bit of that moderator error out of it, and potential moderator bias
That's
too.
yeah, that is true. I can definitely talk on this. So my main appeal in joining this project, I mean, I think I've definitely come to love the world a lot more. I was pretty I was pretty ambivalent about it at the start. I was like, a world is a world, who cares? But now I'm like, all right, yeah. I mean, it's my world, I might as well love it. And that may sound like a very uninspiring vote of confidence, but for me that's a pretty big step. Um, so like I was like, and I'm definitely that has also helped me like embrace the stats more because I'm thinking more about like really what the numbers mean. Like when I first like started working on the stats or on the rule set in general, I wanted to improve a lot on what had been done before, and there was quite a history of stuff that had been done in NES, and lots of projects by people to create like complex simulations using like Excel and or whatever other programming languages they knew. And I knew that I had the programming expertise to like attempt to tackle a project of this magnitude. And I was also thinking like, well, this is a thing that I'm pretty interested in modeling, and I've always been interested in this period of time, the rapid industrialization and the catastrophic destruction of the early 20th century. Um, there's just so much interesting like context-rich stuff happening in that timeline. And I feel that all of that stuff is expressed in the numbers, which is why I am, as people say, too obsessed with the stats. But I think it's just really cool. Like to me, when these countries have all these different EPs, that says a whole lot more than just Britain has more money than France. That says that like there are so many people buying and selling high value goods in Britain right now. Like that's an important thing to be aware of. And it like the what the stats mean on the surface has implications that go very deep. So the more stats you have that are properly curated, properly cared for, I think the like better information you can present to people about what's really going on in the world and be consistent about that. So in terms of the military simulation, I've always been very interested in like military simulations too because they're agonistic concepts, and that feeds into a lot of the work I do for like money, like what I do professionally, which is studying like artificial intelligence and system of system controls, which has a lot to do with like sort of fuzzy logic and not exactly black and white and everything, right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I sort of viewed the military simulations as an opportunity for me to exercise my modeling acumen in an agonistic concept and be like, okay, so I can create a simulation where there's a team A and a team B, and they each have like a force composition, and they each have commands that they can issue. How does one of them issue commands such that they beat the other? And have both of them go at it at the same time. So I view it as a mathematical optimization problem of rational agents interacting, rather than just like I need to know who died and who survived, which is what a lot of mods just need it for, and I appreciate that and I accept that. But I want to feel like whether it's true or not is frankly irrelevant. I want to feel like there's a hard mathematical reason behind every bullet that that gets shot out or whatever.
Interesting.
All right.
I
Perfect.
found that really cool.
Yeah. So now that we've spent 35 minutes on our topic 1.
No, topic 1 and 2, bro.
So
a
little bit. I guess I want to talk a little bit about how we make co-modding work, and I'm going to keep this pretty brief. Aside from having a very clear definition of responsibilities, one of the big things that you have to really be able
that's
to do
right. This is actually really important.
Is you have to trust your co-mod
Yeah.
that anything that they say is canon. Like,
Right.
you have to be able to trust your co-mod that they understand the world enough that a player could ask either mod, and the mods aren't giving completely contradictory answers.
Right.
Or a mod might say like, hey, Nuka, I'm gonna start a riot in Austria, and I'll say, hey, yeah, absolutely, that sounds like that could happen. Or, hey, Kurzith, I'm going to have Catalonia declare independence. Sounds good, Nuka. That sounds good to me. You have to really let the other co-mod.
That is yeah. You have to let the other co-mod speak instead of running over them like I just did.
And I mean, to be perfectly frank, Kurzith and I have had difficulties where we've said like, hey, are we gonna maybe we should just cancel this project because this isn't working out between us, or hey, fuck you, I'm a quit, fuck you too.
So you have
to have a personal rapport with people.
It hasn't been complete paradise, but I think we've been able to make it work because first of all, we don't let ourselves get caught up too much in the details. And this is something that I think is considered sacrilege by a lot of people from the traditional school of Nessing, is that, the details are what really matters, right? Like, why are we doing this if not to obsess over the details? Like, a lot of people really just want to create a cool world that they can tell stories and describe the color of robes that somebody's wearing. And that's cool, I respect that. But it's also not something that I'm particularly interested in. Like, no, go on.
So that's just really how we make the co-modding work, is we let the other person be able to talk, let them speak, and you have to just trust your co-mod that if they say something, they're not just talking out their ass, and you have to be able to back them up too.
Yeah,
So,
in my opinion, it mostly boils down to there's a rule that I use for modding this game, and that main rule I think is weirder things have happened. Like, you might say, oh my god, this player has submitted a policy that's beyond insane. That has happened a few times in this game, as some of you might imagine. Oh my god, this player's policy is completely insane. What do we do? How could this possibly be implemented? And I think that it's important to be able to take a step back and to say, okay, I know some of the details aren't making sense right now, but can I think of a case where something even more screwed up actually happened? And just and say so there is a way that this rather odd course of events could unfold, right?
Indeed.
Yeah.
So now we're going on to our third topic, our update philosophy and how we approach the game. I'll take the point, I guess, on update philosophy because I am the person who, as of I believe 2 updates ago, I now write almost all of the content.
That's
I
right.
think.
Yeah.
Before we would
Yeah.
have Kurzith writing the war articles because he was the one with the access to the war simulator. But at this point, I've started taking over. You might have
Yeah,
noticed
and
a difference in writing style.
this has also been possible because I've improved the fidelity of the simulation so that I can give him more of that information. Whereas previously it was hand waving a few variables, and it was
So
yeah.
yeah, we have a much more robust system under the hood. So that's been pretty great.
Yeah.
So what I try to do is I try to look at everyone's orders, of course. Well, I do. I look at everyone's orders, and I try to figure out what are the most important events to start talking about. War, of course, is the order of the day right now, and it's one of the most apparent things in an update because it usually involves the map changing a few colors, casualties, and stat changes, and it's one of the really big things that of course has to always be reported on. So um I do try to flesh that out a bit more, and because we're also in an era um of the world wars really where you did have these big campaigns and battles, what I've been trying to do is I have been and what I want to continue doing is I want to elaborate on battles. Like i want I want Ahigan in Stockholm to talk about the brave defense that they put up at Hamburg. I want
Right.
Aforian and Decamper to talk about how they tried to fight each other at Bruges or Normandy. I want Masada to remember the great Battle of Omaha,
Uh-huh.
which, spoiler alert,
Yeah,
it's coming.
the moments of individual like heroism and accomplishment are what makes the world like really interesting for people. And I think that like it's cool when mods don't forget that and when they try to get back to it. So I mean, I do a lot of time where like my heads are in the numbers, but I always try to pull back and think about like, you know, okay, so what kind of things are these people doing here? Like, you
And I
know.
really tried to actually highlight that this update for for the domestic side in India, because Robert Kant has actually been really great about filling in the little details of India, which I've definitely appreciated.
Yeah, that's been
And
really cool. I like seeing him post.
so what I kind of did too was I talked a little bit about some things that are a bit more micro, things that you wouldn't necessarily see um, in your Hearts of Iron event pop up. Like, hey, someone just sees BBC Pune and are killing teachers and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted to put that in because I want Robert to see what are the reactions for his
Right.
policies.
Right, and giving
Uh,
a plain like example or contriving a scenario like that is just, I mean, it's evocative. It like explains in like analogously what the problem is, because people are able to look at a bunch of nationalists seizing a radio station and think, oh no, like
yeah.
right, like nationalists are able to do stuff like seize radio stations and broadcast messages to dozens of millions perhaps of
To
Indians.
kill people.
But
Yeah.
that having been said, probably not a whole lot of Indians at that moment were hanging out around radios. So
Yeah. So it can
still,
definitely. I wanted to add that little bit of human element to
yeah,
it.
for sure.
Um. So in terms of what doesn't get included, which can be just as interesting as what is included,
Oh
I
yeah,
generally try to avoid things that have just been ongoing. Like for
yeah,
example, Russia's been constructing a railway. It's like okay, that's kind of been ongoing.
yeah. They've been doing that
Um,
for many years now.
yeah, if Russian death camps that are rumored in the East, we're probably not going to hear about them again until there's more concrete evidence if they do or do not exist. or if they're revealed to be, hey, it was nothing over there.
Yeah.
Which could totally be the case. There might not be any Russian death camps. We never know. The white wolf. And,
I mean, that article was pretty obvious. Like, I go back and read that. I go back and read that article, and the title of the article is like, "Are there Russian death camps?" Like, it's a fucking BuzzFeed article, but it's 1938, and it's about death camps. Like, what the fuck? Are there Russian death camps? You'll never believe what's going on in Poland.
Clickbait.
Yeah.
We'll have 20 gifs and
Christos did leak them. That's actually why we decided to do that. So this is something important to keep in mind, is that we listen to the stuff that you're telling us, and that is a really big indication to us of what's going on in the world. Because like we said, as important as all the numbers and how many soldiers and guns you got are, like, what are the countries thinking? What are the relations right now? What are the deals being negotiated right now? Because those provide enormous insight into the political atmosphere of the time. And having that insight, allows us to express details about the world, and especially to other players. So some players have kept their true intentions secret from us, and we consider that very good OPSEC. But on the other hand, keeping secrets, the more people you want to get involved in your stuff, the more chance there is for the mods to hear it. So on the one hand, you need to regard us as your advisors, but on the other hand, you need to acknowledge us as security leaks. Because if you're telling us some important IC information where you're addressing even a bunch of your closest advisors, 3 can keep a secret if 2 are dead.
The Swiss Herald pays generously for tips.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I'm kind of amused that someone actually did take Switzerland. I was not expecting that. And,
that is an interesting choice.
I don't know if the Swiss Herald will be able to continue its journalistic integrity.
Well, here's the
much
thing.
longer.
Switzerland, I was thinking about this the other day. I think Switzerland is a fortress. It is. I think the Swiss Redout is in full force. I mean, they would probably lose the lowlands, but they could fuck shit up in those mountains.
Yeah. Oh man, Tio is not here. I was gonna actually seg you into something about Brazil. Oh, okay. But yeah. So another thing that's, for example, that I don't really talk about, are things that could be. I don't want to say that they're obvious, but they're a little glaring. And there might be things that might be fermenting. So taking Brazil, for example, you might notice that they have Uruguay. Uruguay is a Spanish-speaking region dominated by the Portuguese Brazilians, and there's probably a little bit of tension going on down there. It's not Uruguayans are in the streets or anything, but they're a populace
they're disenfranchised.
Yeah. Even if they do have the vote too. I mean,
yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter.
What's
if
2
they
million
have
Uruguayans to the 30-something million Brazilians? So that's not really something that we put in the update. If it becomes more serious, then we will put it up.
Right, and that information is available whenever a player launches an inquiry. I mean, that's the other thing, is players have to submit requests for information, to us, pretty much.
Yeah.
That's how they know what's going on in the world.
Uh-huh.
So that's why the communication thing is a two-way street. So we're not saying that you all should be asking all the time, hey, where are all the rebels at? I mean, you shouldn't have to do that. It's just that the Spanish in Uruguay, I mean, that's the situation there, but it's not a pressing matter right now.
And the Swiss Herald doesn't necessarily. They're not going to pick that up.
Right. That's something that might be an opinion piece. We might do that as a flavor piece to help give some more information about the world. Which is the other thing about flavor pieces, is they're half flavor pieces by nature of fundamentally, adding flavor. But on the other hand, that flavor gives a lot of contextual information about what's happening. So
absolutely. Another thing I wanted to address too is the mini updates that we've sometimes been putting out. So as some of you may or may not be aware, both Krezeth and I have pretty full-time schedules. I mean, I work a full-time job, and I have a home life that I have to come home to. I'm engaged. For those of you who do not know,
Oh, you have a home
uh,
life, you poor devil.
Ooh.
yeah. Uh, well, but what I'm trying to say though is that we we have a pretty quick deadline to get our updates out, because even though we have a 2 week period of getting orders in, there is the issue of, one, orders are usually all sent in last minute. So even when I have time um, during the week, if my mind isn't completely melted where I can only play NBA 2K and I might want to like try some update stuff, it's like, oh, I only have 2 orders and I don't want to implement these because there's a 90% chance that someone will invade whichever country this is that I got orders from. So I'm gonna hold off on those. Uh, so that's definitely one thing. We do have a pretty short window to update. We usually try to get it all done in one day. I'll say to Chris, hey, let's crank this all out on Saturday, and because Sunday I have fondue club. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't like it when we have to wait a month in between updates. I mean, this
Yeah,
update is
that
gonna.
always sucks because like it takes players out of the game, and it also sucks for us because when players feel like they can't change anything anymore, they don't, and that stagnates the game. I mean, that's what kills a lot of games in my opinion. I mean, players may or may not send orders up to the deadline, but if players feel like the orders aren't going to be taken, they won't send them. And even if they do, if the moderator doesn't do anything with them, then eventually interest will just peter out to where even the moderator doesn't want to keep updating. So that's why we try to keep the turnaround really low. Like, that's what we've been trying to do more lately, and I think that's a pretty good strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Go on.
one of the issues that is also comes up too is sometimes players don't really do that much, unfortunately, or they're just continuations of last year's
Which is
policies.
fine. I mean,
It
yeah,
is, but that can sometimes mean you're not going to get a mention in the update.
right.
Like Korea, for example, has been doing a massive rural to urban relocation
Oh yeah.
that's been going on for the past 7 years. Um, so that could be something. The one reason, though, I do feel confident about some of this sort of stuff is I feel like we've established a pretty good track record. I feel that we are going to update. Um, like one of the things I will say is that I really do feel that I could continue to update at this pace indefinitely. Really, um,
uh,
I could absolutely see this game reaching the year 2000, um, because I do think we have a pretty sustainable model, um, and I think we have a pretty dedicated player base too. I really love
yeah, it's pretty cool.
uh, the inputs that they do. So um, in terms of that update philosophy, I look at what's important, what must be declared. If there's any border changes, of course, that does come first. Then I look at any human impact on policies that might be some good opinion pieces to put in, and I look at various domestic programs. If there's something that's radical that I feel should be addressed, uh, I'll put that in there. Setting up a state electronics company might not merit a headline, but all of your orders are taken into consideration. We don't
Yeah,
ignore anything.
and that's something we're doing more lately. And you'll be able to see when the uh, especially when the full changes come forward. Like pretty much all the government policies will be listed in the stats except for the classified ones. So you'll be able to see exactly what I did or did not ignore, and you'll be able to say for sure if I did ignore you. Um, well, and I just real quick, I want to say that a really big motivation behind these big stat changes has been to improve transparency because when people started, when the first mentions of railroading come out, I was like, oh, I really hope it doesn't seem like railroading. But I realized that as long as the workings of the game are inscrutable to the players, there's no way you will ever be able to avoid people suspecting you of railroading them. And to be honest, there's no way you can prove it to yourself either, because you won't be able to know if you hand wave something just because you liked that player or because,
Yeah.
yeah. And I can say for sure that I've done that in the past. I think I've been pretty good about it with this game. Like for instance, I love double A, like more than any of the rest of you IoTers. And
Ouch.
I like all of you, honestly, but double A is really cool. That having been said, some of his policies not the best, and
But some of them are good.
yeah,
No?
and some of them
I
are
mean,
good. And I try to and I just try to like stay impartial. But it's always going to be difficult to stay impartial when you have emotions because that's just fucking how it works. So
and
that's
another great aspect of having a co-mod, because I actually
right, because
personally
the
hate
co-mods,
AA.
right, because the
No,
co-mods
I'm
can the
kidding.
co-mods can come in and like and say to you, hey, why are you doing
That
this or
doesn't
this?
seem
Right.
real.
So the fact that we both want to do this and the fact that we're dependent on each other for several key functions are what keeps it going. Like when one of us stops wanting it is when the game will probably stop. And
Yeah.
that means that's a 2 times chance of that happening. But like Nuke said, we feel like there's a lot of gas in the engine. And I personally, I'm having the time of my life working on these stats and everything. And I think that you guys are going to dig these changes coming out.
Yeah, so we're actually about to talk about those.
Oh, okay.
The one thing I did want to talk about before we go is things we were not expecting to happen in this game. You can't see it actually, but Krezeth posted a really cool side by side in our chat of what the game looked like what the world looked like in 1930, which is found on page 1 of Blackened Skies, and what the world looks like in 1938, which is posted on page 45. Um, and it's definitely something that's it really strikes me as how much things that I did not expect
Oh yeah.
how they went, and this is why I love running this game, because there's just been some crazy shit. Like, okay, for example, I thought Hungary was going to be a really key a key regional player.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
Christos one day just says, "Fuck it, I'm
Yeah.
invading."
Yeah.
And
Christos
there
just
goes
declared their
Hungary.
regime illegal and attacked them. And he overwhelmed their conventional military, and that was like it because there was nobody to tell him hey or no or stop. So
So,
yeah,
that was just insane for me to
yeah,
just watch uh, that in Romania, which was also developing into an interesting nation played by Toby. Just watching Russia just overrun them.
oh yeah,
And the fact of the matter was though that Russia, it was a great power, and Romania and Hungary were not. uh, that was just pretty crazy to watch. So that was probably the most unexpected thing for me. What about you, Tio? What was yours?
The most unexpected thing in this game, huh? I don't know. I gotta think on this.
We can come back to you.
Yeah, for me, the most unexpected thing was me caring about. No, I'm kidding. The most unexpected thing was yeah, that is a tough question to be honest. I guess the most unexpected thing would be the United Kingdom attacking northern Germany. I
Yeah,
really didn't think that was coming.
that came out of left field. I find it kind of funny.
Ophorian gave no indication that he wanted to do that, but he was clearly mobilizing behind the scenes for some large military action, and he just like kept such a tight lid on it, and he was able to do that because he didn't really need to coordinate with other players that much. Even though he's technically dependent on India and Australasia and South Africa, um, you know, those countries were sometimes not sending orders and mostly like towing the line with Britain because they were all aware that they were dependent on Britain to a non-trivial degree. And so Britain was
Yeah.
pretty much free to pursue their policies because they didn't really need anything from anybody else, and they just did this friggin' like build up and attacked Germany, and that sort of came out of left field.
Yeah, I mean, like they were definitely building up for it with their Scandinavian conquest when they got Sweden, and there was definitely a really confusing situation for a bit. But they're in an interesting aspect. I definitely thought that Ophorian, because he's actually Canadian. I
Oh,
thought
is
he
he?
might have he might have done some hometown pride and tried to liberate his country and settle the deal with the U.S. But no, he went for Germany, which I thought that was kind of interesting. He and the German player actually know each other in real life too. So
Oh, really?
yeah,
That's pretty funny.
it was pretty amusing to me when I found all that out. So that another thing I thought was unexpected too, actually, was how the China situation played out. I definitely didn't anticipate um, Guangzhou or Guangxi or whatever.
Oh, actually,
Uh,
yeah, I want to change my answer. That's the most unexpected thing.
that came out of left field. I thought it was going to
That
be.
came out of even further than left field. That person wasn't even playing. And then it just
Yeah,
started happening.
and the China situation, I definitely anticipated. Qing versus Han Republic. One of them would try to get Guangzhou or Guangxi or whatever it used to be called um, involved for them. They had the personal ties. The Qing was his master and the Han was his student. But now we have the Zhao dynasty invading the Han to settle this once and for all instead of the Qing. So
Uh-huh.
that was interesting.
Yeah, and he has been a real emperor, I gotta say.
Wow.
Really taken up the emperor mantle.
That,
So we're at about an hour.
came out left today.
Yeah, so we're at about an hour streamed.
Oh, Tio has his thing too.
Oh, yes.
I think.
Theo's unexpected.
Okay. All right. So I think that my victory over the monarchists, actually, like my very quick victory, I should say. Like it happened a lot faster than I thought it would, essentially.
Yeah.
That I think that's probably like my thing, because my focus has pretty much been entirely on my region. Like I haven't really like I do check up on the global scale, on like the global global theater. Yeah, but like where I'm paying attention to the most is of course like where I am. So like for me, I think everything else just came like secondary, and like my sudden takeover of the monarchists, what felt like, I don't know, it went significantly better than I thought it would. I guess
it must have been like a oh wow moment.
Yeah, kind of, because
okay.
Like I had the U.S. blockading me. I believe at that point they were blockading me. And so I assumed that I was going to get flooded with with U.S. troops, and it was going to be like a tooth and nail fight. Like, I mean, sure, it was really bloody. It was a tooth and nail fight, yes, but like, I just wasn't expecting the monarchists to just collapse.
Yeah, we tried to indicate that the monarchists were clearly sitting on like borrowed time.
Yeah, I mean, like I noticed
the graffiti in the cities and stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. So like I was expecting.
No, go on.
I was expecting an uprising, like a popular uprising, like that would depose them or like help like tip the odds in my favor. But I guess I wasn't like entirely expecting like the entire system to fall apart. Which I'm not saying here nor there. It was just like, okay, wow, this is going a lot better than I thought it was. than I thought it would.
Yeah, that's another thing I like to do in these updates is when we know something is coming up, or when we have a pretty good expectation that that's going to be the case. We like to do the handwriting on the wall thing. We like to give some like ominous indication of it, because there's certainly a lot to be ominous about in this world. And if you're trying to like be an empire and rule over many peoples of many lands, you gotta learn to read the handwriting on the wall.
Right.
Or graffiti on the wall.
Or graffiti.
Yeah. So that was great. Thank you, Tio. And what are you gonna? Actually, I shouldn't ask, but definitely think.
So
looking
Tio,
at that South America battle that's coming up, if it's coming up.
Well, I think Tio is not too happy with the Socialist International, right?
Well,
that'll be.
I mean, you don't have to address this if you don't want to. You can say, I have no comment. That would be extremely appropriate.
No, I can comment. I think I can comment. I think. So I'm sure you guys saw the post. I left the Socialist International.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was mainly to do with me not really like I was in it, sure, but was I really a member?
Yeah.
who knows? Like.
Yeah, definitely part of the problem you had with the Socialist International was that they were ideological comrades in a reality that was very inconvenient for that comradeship.
Yeah, like there was no real way for us to really cooperate on anything.
You may have had like control of Brazil and pretty much the support of the people, you know, like a mandate to rule Brazil, but like your enemies just made it too difficult for you to like sync up with your allies, with your comrades abroad. I mean, I definitely think Brazil's big problem has been the isolation imposed on it by the United States in some part, and also the bloodiness of the revolution on the other part.
Yeah, but one, I can't really help, at least not at this point. All I can do is try to rebuild in a very isolated position.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what I'm trying to do. I hope that with my joining like the Democratic League thing, that I would like I'll be in a less bad position.
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking about this with Tony earlier. I was like, well, you know, if Brazil joins the Democratic League, that would probably mean the Brazils would be joining the British trade group, which would definitely help out a lot, as you know, the British trade group has a lot of demand for some of the goods that Brazil has, but also you know, it's also a very, you know, crowded trade group and is run by Britain, who are a bit fascist right now. So
a little bit.
Yeah. So, but that's another thing that I think is pretty cool about this setting, is that, you know, we have players engaging in complex intersectionalism with others. Like, you know, communists aren't just allying with communists for the hell of it. They have to think about the geopolitical realities of their situation.
Yeah, exactly. And my geopolitical reality is that I can't ally with communists.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. And moving on to our final topic, it just says an hour ago. Well, that kind of sucks. Whatever. At an hour and something minutes is the coming changes for Blackened Skies.
Yeah. So
the two big things are economy and doctrine. So at this, I'll give it over to Krezith.
Yeah. So people have been asking a lot about the changes, and I realize it's kind of a dick thing to wait until the end of the podcast to talk about this, but whatever. Like so like people have been expressing some you know, just really just curious like inquiries about what's going on with the doctrine, what's going on with the economy system. Basically, I'm trying to rescale the economy system so that it's based on the sale or the sale and consumption of goods. I try to get a realistic calculation for GDP involved. And I'm able to do this by building a demand model for all the resources that countries need in order to perform stuff like, you know, industrialize. So for instance, you know, we know that iron is a pretty important resource. Everybody who's played Civilization knows that. And iron is also useful for smelting into steel. So steel is then useful for fucking building everything. So we have constructed a demand model that starts with like basic inputs and renewable resources, and goes toward I'll talk about science, and goes to the final industrial outputs. So that way, I can like track which goods are being short and which goods are not, and which goods are in surplus, and adjust like the value of base cost just based on simple supply and demand calculations. So it's simplified in some respects, but in other respects, I think it's quite sophisticated, and it allows, you know, us to accurately measure how GDP changes from year to year based on actual changes in productivity. So currently we have an expertise system, which is still being integrated, but is fully integrated with this new system and affects the value of various like types of finished goods. So there will be a base value, which is the base value of manufactured goods in your country. Well, you will typically be higher for more industrialized or countries with a lot more expertise in like all kinds of production. And then there's the variable value. And this is not something that you guys will have to really worry about. But the variable value will just be based on your expertise. So if you have like a really good chemistry expertise, like and there will be indications so that you know which is a good expertise and which is a bad expertise. You won't just have to guess. So if you have a really good chemistry expertise, you can be like, oh, I bet we have some pretty advanced steel refining techniques, and I bet we're pretty good at incorporating the more arcane elements like chromium and tungsten into our industrial processing. And so you might think, okay, Owen, but that's that's an extremely arcane thing to think about. Like, how does it help me to know that I can mix in this tungsten and stuff? And it's like, well, really, the resources are just there to give you an idea of like what kind of stuff is going in your favor and what isn't. So if you know you have a steel shortage, you know that that's going to make it more difficult for you to acquire the stuff to build more factories, making it more difficult for you to build more industry. Alternatively, if you have an oil shortage, you have to import that oil somehow, or buy it from another place, and that increases the demand for oil. So we get dynamic valuation based on the new model, and we can see like, chemistry is all chemistry. By the way, Tony just asked, I thought chemistry was related to medicine. It is, but it's related to a lot of different things. Chemistry is sort of a catch-all category, but all the categories are pretty catch-all in their own way. Like electrics is pretty damn catch-all. But right, they're really supposed to be indicating like a general process of learning. Let's see. What was I saying? Does anybody want to help me out?
Science.
Right. Well, I was talking about base value, and right. So the new system will be able to dynamically evaluate the value of goods and the value of labor in your country, and we'll be able to like give you really detailed information about what's going on if you need it, and less detailed information if you don't need it. Like you'll be able to like if a problem is as simple as a steel shortage, the solutions you consider can be as simple as building new steel manufacturing plants. Like, why are you bothering me with this? Just build more plants. Or like maybe striking up a trade deal with another country that you can see in the stats has a surplus of steel. So that's the kind of extra depth I'm hoping to add. And for the most part, it's not going to be something that really needs to be micromanaged, but it will be a strategic consideration. And again, the place that's going to feature most prominently is in the Socialist International's oil shortages, which are incipient. Now, as for, so that's what I have in store for the economy, basically. And we'll have new valuation of GDP and base cost. Basically, everything will be a little cheaper, but also, it'll be more important for you not to spend money on wasteful, expenditures. Like currently, some players are able to get away with spending a lot of money on like vanity projects. And the reason they're able to get away with that, not saying that anybody's making any bad policies per se, but like the effectiveness of the policy doesn't currently manifest in any meaningful way. So it'll be helpful for us to be able to say, here's exactly what's going on, and here's the actual situation. So I'm looking forward to the changes, and it'll be completely integrated with expertise. So like there will be good modeling of private actor actions, and also what government demand can do to stimulate an economy as well. And I'll be talking about all this a lot more, obviously, in the post when I like post about all this stuff. But I will also have like a debt functionality, so players will be able to realistically spend into debt, and it's just going to be really cool. Like it's I feel
Real
like
cool.
this is me taking the ideals of simulationism that were passed down to me from my forebears like Symphony D and Disenfranchised and Joseph Stalinator, and implement some kind of like some new take on like simulationism that's like friendly, that's not overwhelming. I want players to feel like they're in control, but I also want them to feel like they are able to tackle these problems. And even if they don't feel like that, at least they should enjoy the feeling of being in command. And that's something I like about Christos, is that he just seems to have a genuinely good time, just like, you know, being a bad guy and just wrecking things in these games. And
Yeah.
he's you may like him, you may hate him, but you can admit that he's very efficient at enjoying games. So uh, and the doctrine changes. So I completely changed the way armies are considered, just because like there's so much wrong with like building units discreetly in a situation where force composition really matters for the strategies you want to execute. So I decided to say, well, what is a doctrine really? It's just a government saying this is how I think we should fight war. So I think that doctrine naturally influences the type of build-up effort that you would ideally hope to achieve. Now, so that's why when you change your doctrine, that goes directly to influencing build-up policy. Of course, it'll still be possible for players to like, be foolish, because that possibility will always exist. But at least now there's a consistent mechanism for implementing like what players really want to achieve out of their army. Like a player who wants an inexpensive army with a lot of like infantry but not a lot of like support guns or anything else shouldn't, have to be like delving, I think, too much into the theory of how the military combat works, unless that's a detail that is directly relevant to them. And I can replace the need for that to happen by just saying, look, if you put points in mass, that'll make the build up cheaper and go faster. And then players will be like, okay, great, I can put 5 points into mass, and now I have simulated a major mobilization effort, right? And that's it. It doesn't have to be more complex than that. So then putting points into firepower increases the focus on having like, basically on having guns, but on having like increasing the volume of fire you can put out. Mobilization increases like the prominence that motorized and tank divisions play. And so then having high motorized plus high firepower would naturally imply the existence of like medium or even heavy tank. So, and then support is the focus on providing support to your combat divisions, and that can take the form of like medical tents, like signal headquarters, maintenance divisions, combat engineers, all that good stuff. Basically the stuff that helps the army do what it needs without exploding. And then integration is the stat that addresses pretty much how well different parts of the army are integrated with each other. And so in a sense, it's sort of like, codifies some of the ways that the military interacts with itself and with others. I imagine that increasing points in integration would be akin to like publishing a white paper or publishing an official change in doctrine of how like your air forces and ground forces should interact, for example. So these sort of like help set your doctrine in stone, but they also give it the streamlining that it needs to be more efficient. And this is something I'll address more in later posts. But integration is basically how well your army works overall. And then discipline is how good the army is at following orders. And this is very helpful when you need them to do something that they aren't doing. And you might think, well, buddy, isn't that everything? And it's like, well, actually, think of this. What if you need them to do military police duty? You need them not to like abuse the people, but you also need them to keep the peace. Because abusing the people is just going to breed resentment, and undisciplined troops are going to be more likely to do that because there's nobody telling them to stop. You know what I mean? So that allows me to also simulate stuff like military police and like how really just how good the soldiers are at not like deserting or shooting their commanding officer.
A 20-year-old guy from Zhao is probably really interested in, taking advantage of the Thai women they just conquered, and discipline prevents that,
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, there's always going to be a dark narrative behind it, but the point is that we need to know what the situation is so that we can think about what the consequences will be in realistic terms, and that includes acknowledging some harsh truths.
But yeah, And then science. Do you want to go into that?
Yavor just asked, how would I prevent people from increasing one in every category of doctrine? Just doing that. Well, I think I mentioned it in the thread at some point. Again, this is why I need to catch up with you guys. But every time you increase a doctrine point, it costs 1 AP maintenance, and that AP is tied up supporting that, because doctrine is assumed to be an implementation of government policy. So when you put points into doctrine, that's where your government is being focused. So like it costs AP to support doctrine policy. And if you reduce points in your doctrine categories, you get those AP back. So.
Exciting.
And the other thing is, the more you spread out, the less you specialize. Ahagen just pointed that out in the chat. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. If you increase by 1 in every category, the net effect would be positive, but it would decrease your focus. So if you were really reliant on a particular focus in your strategy, you have to accept that you're going to dilute that. But overall, it would probably improve things, just because you're putting more resources into trying to make that happen. And now we have some more questions here. Actually, I wonder if I can put the questions up on the screen. That would be really cool. It's very expensive AP-wise to be good at everything. That's right. Like, you could attempt to be good at everything if you had the AP to support it. I imagine that there will be at least one player who's like, oh, I don't want to spend anything on social policies. I just want to put all my AP into military and build the biggest military ever. And
that's what we call North Korea.
Yeah. Yeah, like that you can do that, but spending money on the military is a black hole, because those are not consumable goods. Guns. They are just for holding on to and shooting people with. And yeah, like it would hurt your economy to focus so much on a military. Tell that to the NRA.
Yeah. So yeah, that's exciting. North Korea, I'm interested to see emerge. So
Yeah,
if anyone has any volunteers, I mean, dump that AP.
If anybody wants to play North Korea,
I mean, of
please
course, like
don't.
if you're looking at a situation like 1945 Germany or Japan, where you have the enemies at the gates, then by all means put everything into
Oh yeah.
into
Like
your military.
we're just saying that, like, that just means, like, it's a percentage of what your government is focused on. So if you're in a situation where literally the only thing you need to, like, think about is surviving, then yeah, put all your points into the military. You have to mobilize, man. You have to deal with the problem. Although you could also put points into, like, various other programs, if you can think of them, that might help your war effort. So I mean, there's lots of options, like, is what we're saying.
I do want to address something that was said in the chat by Robert. I believe it's Robert Kant. I'm not sure, but that's my best guess. He says, I feel like I feel a deep need to actually read the rules. And one thing I do want to say is, well, yes, you should read the rules, of course.
Yeah, well, actually, don't read these rules, because you'll be more confused.
Rules.
You can read them if you're, like, interested in in them for elementary purposes, but these rules might just confuse you, because the stats are a little out of sync with them.
But yeah, so one thing I do want to point out, though, is that you really don't need to have a huge in-depth understanding of these rules, because what we've always wanted to do is we've wanted you to be the leader of your nation in a macro sense, not necessarily in a micro sense. So we are always okay with you saying, hey, I want to design my army off of 1941 United Kingdom or 1942 Germany, or whatever you'd like to do. If you say, hey, I want my economy to be doing this, we will make that happen to the
Right.
best of our
We can help.
ability.
Yeah, we can like do the stuff necessary to implement the policies you want to achieve. Like you should be thinking about it in like the like from the point of view of a policymaker. Like what does he have to worry about, or she?
Yeah. The one thing I will say is, like, of course, if you tell us to do something like improve economy, just like something
Yeah.
so vague,
Yeah.
we're gonna be like, I guess we'll make roads and factories
Honestly,
or some shit like that.
what that would do is nothing. Like, and especially like you would be like that by itself is not enough. You would have to say something like hire a think tank to think about ways to improve the economy. Okay, that I can see. But just like ordering people to improve the economy, that's how you're going to lose money to what we call corruption. Because you're not like
White elephant projects.
right, exactly.
Yeah. So that'll just be one thing we want to continue emphasizing, is that you don't have to worry about micromanaging your various different aspects of the nation. Um, we handle the trade. We handle a lot of the economic growth. If you want to do big policies, that's of course on you and making sure
Uh-huh.
that you have the AP for that. But
Right. Yeah,
we're-
AP is the new main currency of action. This game.
the stats are for us, really,
Right.
to help
Well,
manage.
yeah, they're
and
for us and they're
for the
you.
players
But
too, of
like
course. But
yeah. Like and
if you're a storyist, you can still play this game.
yeah, for
You don't
sure,
have
dude.
to be
Anybody can play this
simulationist.
game. Like I mean, you do have to like you think about it, but it's it's not like it's an unscalable wall, I think. And we will always try to be very patient, understanding, and like help you, understand what's going on in the game. All right, so Ahigan is asking a question right now. He's asking, so how granular or specific do we expect players to be with science? Like he says, for example, I'm a military history buff. I know very particularly what text I want to emphasize. How specific you'd like me to go? So, so that's a really good question, because since you're a military history buff, surely you know that some technologies helped win wars far more than others, even really impressive ones. Like as much as we all love heavy tanks, and we have to, at some point we have to acknowledge the most powerful weapon of World War II was the radar dish. Like, oh, clearly everybody wants radar. So this is why we bring a little bit of policing into the mix, and we're like, yeah, all right, we're going to assume that technologies occur at a semi-realistic pace. We don't want players to be too granular, and we don't want players to say stuff like invest money into lasers, because I know that lasers will be good. That's not genuine. We just want them to think about general areas. Like if you have more experience in your electronic industry, that means that more people are working with electronics in your country. It just means that more people are working with electronics. So that will feed into a new discovery system, which is still, in the oven. And the discoveries will like dictate the pace at which quote unquote technologies like appear in the world. Like we'll be able to like if we want to say something like where's radar invented, because that's coming up obviously. We can look at who has the electric expertise and who has the Air Force expertise, and we can pretty much derive a probabilistic model of where we expect the discovery to happen or to occur. And then we can just run that random number generator and boom, game a chance, but it'll give us some kind of basis for saying like, oh yeah, well these guys just worked with electronics a lot, so they're gonna get the electronic based technologies more often than others. So so that's sort of what we're planning for that, because like obviously if you know how history goes, you know that like some texts are going to be better than others, but we don't want you guys to have to Google which texts were best, because that's not genuine. I mean, you certainly can if it helps you understand what's going on, and I completely applaud that, but you don't have to, because those discoveries will be automated, because there's not really a way to like force science to happen anyway. So it happens as a natural result of people like just messing with stuff in a country. At least that's the basis of the expertise system. So, that's how we'll be handling like particular technological innovations and growth. So yeah, that answers Tony's question about how we deal with hindsight. How do we deal with the fact that players know what's good and it's bad?
Yeah.
So
Well, I think that's just about everything. Unless
yeah, we
Yeah.
hit everything on our schedule.
a
And
little bit over, but whatever.
yeah, we did go over an hour, but it was all right. I mean,
It was high.
nobody has to watch this anyway, but it's okay. So yeah, Tayo, would you like to say any like last words before we sign off here?
I think just thanks for doing this, I guess.
Oh,
I think
Thanks.
yeah.
I think it provided some clarity in terms of like, I think it provided transparency, I guess,
Yeah,
into
yeah.
like how things are done and how I guess you expect people to send in orders in a certain way, like not directing people, but like kind of showing people, hey, instead of like saying, like you talk about the economy example, instead of saying put money into your economy, like think more about like,
Yeah.
yeah, you kind of get what I'm saying. I
Think more about like think about it as if it were like a real world. And we know that for some people who get hung up in some of the details, that's asking for too much. And I accept that, But on the other hand, I think that, at a certain point you just got to chill out and learn to accept the absurd and just roll with it and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that's Blackened Skies podcast.
Woo!
Thanks for listening. And we love Blackened Skies obviously, and we put a lot of effort into it. Like more effort than any person should probably put into any hobby. But
Well, we've done it.
but it's a lot of fun, and we hope that you guys continue to enjoy Blackened Skies for as long as we continue producing it. So, any final words? Final words?
Final words.
Final words. All right. And we're done.